Picture this. You're looking at a resume. There are 3 sets of initials after the person's name. You recognize one of them. The other 2, you're guessing. And you're about to make a hiring decision partly based on the one you happen to know. And that is the whole problem right there. So let's fix it. If we haven't met yet, I am Candice Mitchell, the founder and CEO of Talent Collective. And why I feel so passionately about this is I have built 7 learning and development functions from scratch. Companies anywhere from 50 to 6,500 people. 20 years in this field, across 14 industries and 4 continents. I've also spent years training internal learning and development teams to run the function themselves. So I know exactly what it takes to do this job. And I know exactly how far that is from what a certificate can prove. In this episode, I am breaking down the 6 credentials you'll see across your desk when you're hiring an L&D or talent development person. Those are APTD, CPTD, PHR, SHRM-CP, CPTM, AIHR. So many acronyms, am I right? So let's dig into what each one signals, what it doesn't, and where a certification should factor into your decision at all. I'm giving you the whole thing today on the podcast. No cushioning, of course not. So stick with me to the end because I'm also going to tell you about a 1-page version of this that you can actually save and pull out the next time a resume with a bunch of letters lands on your desk. Section 1, we're going to go through the incentive problem. Let me start with the theory-based programs, and I'll give them their due first. On-demand certification content teaches real theory. It's structured, it's proven, and if you're building foundational knowledge, that matters. Here's what it doesn't do. Most of it is on demand, which means no room, no pushback, no way to raise your hand and say, that doesn't work in my org. Now what? It's one person's framework built from their one situation, delivered at you. And I know this because I'm on the other side of it now. I get pitched constantly to be that expert in the room. A 30-minute webinar slot would have put me back by $8,000. A podcast guest appearance, $1,200. I turn those down regularly now, and here's why that should matter to you and not just for me. Because if I had paid that much to be there, I am not there to develop you. I am there to sell you something. Let's call a spade, shall we? There is nothing wrong with charging for expertise. But when someone spent that kind of money to be believed, it changes what you are listening to. That's an incentive, like not a conspiracy. Just know that it's there. I've also paid to sit in programs that were stacked with these high-level experts who, just talked at me on a pre-recorded webinar. No way to ask a question, and it took real work on my end to make any of it fit my environment. And honestly, it was too hard to be worth it. So I canceled that subscription. That's the frame for everything I'm about to tell you. Theory has real value. It is not the same thing as experience. And no single credential proves someone has the street smarts to lead your function. Moving into section 2 now, what a certification actually tells you. To me, it tells you 3 things. 1, this person's spent time studying a defined body of knowledge. 2, they cared enough to sit an exam or complete a program. And 3, they can speak the vocabulary of the field. What it doesn't tell you is whether they can walk into a room with your CFO and translate a capability gap into numbers that land. It doesn't tell you whether they've actually built something versus studied how building works. 6 credentials show up most often on learning and development resumes, and they are not interchangeable. 2 are general HR credentials, landing on L&D resumes because a lot of people pass through HR broadly first. Another one is built specifically for the training manager role. One puts candidates in a live room with peers before they're certified. The rest are solo efforts against a body of knowledge. Which one should you care about depends entirely on who you're hiring, and that's the part most comparison lists skip. Let me walk you through all 6. The APTD and CPTD, those are exam-based self-study credentials from the talent development world. PHR and SHRM-CP, those are general HR credentials. They're not learning and development specific. They're common on resumes, but light on signal for talent development capability specifically. Then you have the CPTM, and that's the one built around the training manager role. And it's the only one on the list that puts you in a live room with other practitioners before you're certified. And then there are several AIHR program-based. These are broader general HR with some specializations. So the snapshot version, PHR and SHRM-CP tell you someone knows HR broadly. APTD and CPTD tell you someone studied talent development theory on their own. CPTM tells you someone sat with peers and practiced the training manager role specifically. The AIHR tells you someone completed a structured HR program. None of these can tell you whether the person can read your business. I want to tell you a story here because it's a thing I keep coming back to when I think about the difference between credentials and capability. I once heard the most decorated Olympic athlete in history speak at a conference. Someone in the room asked her, "Did you have to work hard at this, or were you just naturally gifted?" And she said, honestly, both. She only started running in high school, but when she started, it came naturally to her. And yes, of course, she worked hard every single day. She was up before anyone else, running more miles than anyone else, practicing more than anyone else. But there was also just this given talent underneath all of it. And that's how I feel about learning and development, if I'm honest with you. It's something I've worked on daily for 20 years, roughly 8 to 10, hell, sometimes 14 hours a day. You do the math. That's a lot of hours logged in this craft. But it's also something I just get. I get the landscape. I get the business side of this work. And here's the point of the story though. If that same Olympic runner had spent her career playing hockey instead, she'd have a different skill set entirely. Hockey would help her, sure. It would not make her the best runner in the world. And that's what I want you to take from this section. A certification tells you someone trained. It does not tell you what they trained for or whether it's the event you actually need them to run. This story leads into section 3, which is require, recognize, and overlook. A little simple framework that I use, and I want you to steal this because what tells you something about a coordinator tells you nothing about a director. So let's use some examples here. For an entry-level coordinator or specialist, recognize the APTD or some of the AIHR programs as a signal of commitment, right? You don't need to require either of those, but look for one real project they built and pay attention to how they talk about what didn't work. That's more telling than the letters themselves. For a senior learning and development lead or manager, recognize the CPTD, the CPTM, or a relevant AIHR specialization, but also particularly the CPTM, since it's built around the training manager role specifically. But verify it in the interview. Don't just take the resume's word for it. And then for a strategic people function head, you could overlook credentials almost entirely. None of these 6 substitute for boardroom fluency or the street smarts to read your org's actual problem instead of the one they studied. Look for a capability gap that closed, a number that they moved. A cohort-based applied program carries more weight here than any exam because leading the top of a function takes real-world experience under pressure and not just a past test. I'll give you a real example of what that pressure actually looks like because it's easy to say real world experience and have it mean absolutely nothing. So I work with companies right now that are quadrupling in size in 3 months. I had one client hire 12 people in a single day. My hands are dirty with that stuff in real time. I'm not someone who built something 20 years ago and now tells you what to do from a distance. That's just not how I work. And it's not how anyone should be leading your function at that level. I also sit in C-suite boardrooms with 20 executives at the table, financial people who are not going to be swayed by soft language, right? They need the numbers. They need the facts. You cannot fool that room. And that's the environment your senior hire needs to be able to walk into, and no exam prepares someone for that room. Only being in it does. Which leads us into section 4, the 5 interview questions. Because none of this matters if the person can't read the room they're walking into. Passing an exam proves someone studied a framework. Leading the function proves they know your business, the people in it, and what's happening in the world that's about to hit your industry specifically. I always use this example. AI is not touching a SaaS company the way it's touching a construction company. If your candidate can't tell you the difference, the certification on their resume is decoration. So here are the 5 questions I would use. Question 1. Walk me through a time the framework you learned didn't fit. What did you do instead? That will tell you whether they can think past the model. Question 2. What's happening in our industry right now that's going to change what might people need from you in the next 12 months? This will test whether they can translate the macro environment into something specific for you, not a general trend they read somewhere. And if you're anything like me, don't worry about writing this down. These questions are in the Capability Edge on Substack. So question 3 is, how would your approach be different running this function at a construction company versus a SaaS company? And of course, insert your own industry there. The point is, if they can't name the difference, they don't understand the business they're about to walk into. Question 4, what would you want to know about the people here in your first 30 days? And how would that shape the capability plan you build? That will tell you whether they're thinking about real business problems and real careers or just rolling out a program. And question 5, walk me through a framework or model you learned that you had to tweak to actually work in a real environment? What did you change and why? Again, there is no model or framework on the planet that fits everywhere perfectly. So this will tell you whether they know that too. I'll leave you with one more story because I think it says more than any framework I could give you. I coached someone in the academy for 15 minutes, right? We're in a group coaching session and we call it a hot seat coaching. And he came on and asked for the coaching, which took 15 minutes. And this person is a person with 40 years of experience. He is a vice president in HR. And he said to me that it was the most valuable 15 minutes of coaching he'd received in his entire career, 40 years in. And within 15 minutes, moved the needle more than a credential ever had. My clients don't ask me about my letters after my name. They ask if I understand their business. If I can bring their people along, that's it. That's the whole test. So when you're sitting across from a candidate, ask yourself the same question you'd want asked of me. Not what did they study, but what can they actually do in your room with your people under real pressure? Okay, we've covered the 6 credentials, the framework, the 5 questions, and that is everything I've got. Now, if you want the version of this that you can save and have a side-by-side comparison download of all 6 credentials, the cost, the format, my honest take on each one, plus these 5 questions written out so you can pull them up before your next interview, it's all sitting on the Capability Edge over on Substack, all included there. The link will be in the description. And I built it because I know you're not going to remember 6 acronyms after listening to one episode, and you shouldn't have to. Thanks for listening. Again, I am Candice Mitchell. It's great to have you here, and I will see you over in the next episode of The Capability Edge.